Thank you, Heather, and hello, everyone. Just a quick confirmation that you can hear me okay? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be addressing the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association 2022 conference. I just recently realized how old an organization this is. It's in, I guess it's 43rd year, and that's pretty extraordinary. I mean, that would make it one of the sort of the founding organizations of this type, which is fantastic. I'm glad to know that, and I'm honored to be a presenter for it. So I'm Seth Itzkan. I'm the co-founder of Soil4Climate. We advocate for soil restoration as a climate solution. And the title of the presentation is How Farmers Can Be Climate Heroes. So obviously this talk will be on climate. Sometimes people don't want to have that conversation, but if you're here, you know you're going to have it. And I want to emphasize the word heroes here, because I really do mean that. That's not just hyperbole. And to even go further in that sort of vein of language, to borrow a phrase from Buckminster Fuller, who talked about Spaceship Earth, I really see this as how farmers can be captains of Spaceship Earth. And to add even a little more reality to the hyperbole, the fact is that soil is the global thermostat. And I'm going to show you peer-reviewed papers which refer to soil as the global thermostat. Okay, so people who manage soil, literally, not figuratively, it's not hyperbole, you really are managing the global thermostat. And that really does make you a climate hero or a captain of Spaceship Earth, shall we say. So we're going to talk about the science and some of the practice and some of the policy, and then even sort of the paradigm of how this conversation is received and what we can do to sort of move that forward. Okay, so let's just jump into it. Just a little bit about Soil4Climate. We're about 6 years old. We just had our 6th birthday. This is me crashing the party at COP21, otherwise known as the Paris Climate Accords. So, you know, we've been trying to be a presence in the global narrative. This is with Ratan Lal, was the world's sort of leading soil scientist, generally recognized as the world's leading soil scientist. And then behind me is the poster. You see it says 4 per 1,000, and I'm actually wearing the 4 per 1,000 sticker now. I just realized that a couple minutes ago. That's one of the premier global international organizations that is in the same space we are. I mean, we're, you know, a small nonprofit, but they were actually initiated by the nation of France, by the agricultural minister of France. So that organization has a lot of clout. And if you're interested in this topic, I would recommend you also check out that one, as well as our own, of course. It's just the number 4 and then P and then 1000.org. We're Soil4Climate. We're very, very similar, but, you know, they have a, you know, admittedly a more prestigious board, but nonetheless, we're colleagues in that space with them. And so I show this slide, you know, not just because it's the Earth and it's sort of appropriate, but to really make the point about how thin the atmospheric layer on the Earth really is. I mean, the Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter, and the area that we call the climate is really like a mile. So it's really like 1/8,000th of the diameter of the Earth. If this were a bowling ball, it would be less thin than the paint or the varnish on the ball itself. And so I just kind of want you to get that sense that we really can impact it. And, you know, and even now, as I'm looking at this picture, I'm seeing something new that I hadn't even seen before. You see with the Africa and sort of North Africa is the more yellow, you know, drier area, and then sort of middle area. You can even just from seeing this, you can conceive how just changing the proportion of the land mass that's, let's say, green and growing and doing photosynthesis versus the land mass that isn't, you could change the climate. I mean, just by looking at this picture, you could kind of see, yeah, okay, you know, I could see how that is possible. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, so this is just sort of an idealized picture of the grasslands around the world, and they are the largest terrestrial ecosystem, is a grasslands, and the grassland ecosystem is itself divided into several parts, like they'll say savanna, temperate savanna, or semi-arid area, grassland, prairie, but it's all a similar type of ecosystem that has a seasonal rainfall and co-evolved with ruminants and is a major store of terrestrial carbon in the soil. And there's, you know, your picture of your CO2 being drawn down. Excuse me one second. Now, this again is a sort of idealized illustration of sort of the major regions of the world that fall into this category. Now, North Africa and, you know, parts of the middle of Australia and you know, and the Arabian Peninsula, you know, can be considered desert. But a lot of what is today desert was formerly a grassland, or at least a savanna. And so part of our effort is to consider ways that these areas can be restored and the potential drawdown that's possible there. Now, one of the themes that we'll be talking about is the relationship between grasslands and carbon and ruminants, and the sort of the evolution of that, and what we can do today as farmers to sort of participate, if you will, in this natural dynamic. Now, this was a way of participation, which was, of course, horrifying. You know, this was purposeful buffalo genocide, purposeful. You know, people were paid to bring in skulls. And here you see a mountain of buffalo skulls, literally a mountain. So this is a horrifying picture. But what they didn't know that they were doing, and the reason why I'm showing it here, is because this is the beginning of desertification. And I'm having a little problem with advancing on my end. I apologize. Okay, and then probably about 30, 40 years after that, that picture was probably taken around 1890 or so. So here's the Dust Bowls. And so now let's talk about, you know, what a healthy prairie and pasture should look like. This is from an exhibit called Exposed: The Secret Life of Roots by the National Botanical Society. And these are real grassland plants, you know, perennial grasses with their roots cleaned off, obviously, mounted on top of a cross-sectional photograph. But if you look down, I wonder, does my cursor show up? Can you all see my cursor? You see how they're tied here, almost braided? I mean, if these were not, I mean, the grasses would be like up here, right? There'd be like another 3 feet on there. So this A horizon here, it's actually goes deeper than this. So you're talking about in a healthy prairie, you know, 9 feet of A horizon, and good soil carbon levels could be as high as 10%. 10% soil organic matter over much of the earth. So this is literally the global thermostat. This is where soils are being the global thermostat. This is how they regulate the temperature of the earth, by sequestering carbon in the soil. And it's not just the carbon. It isn't just that simple, and I don't want to say it's just about the carbon. There are a million other factors as well, one of which is what's called evaporative cooling. So the surface area of all these leaves transpiring itself creates a major cooling effect. Obviously, if you're standing here and there's a parking lot across the street, you're going to be cooler here. Why? It's both the same CO2, it's both the same sunlight. There's an evaporative cooling effect going on here. So grasses cool the climate in multiple ways. Sequestering carbon is a major one of them, obviously, but there are other factors as well. So I also just want to, oh, I apologize. I also just want to, if I were to do this exhibit, or if it were to be redone, I would suggest that they put pictures of cows or any type of ruminant also in this picture. So imagine a whole herd of cows up here or other ruminant, right? That really would sort of complete the scenario of this system. Now, so there's the issue of, or the narrative, or what we like to call sources and sinks. Basically, these numbers are old, but what you want to just get here is the sense of the flow of the source and the sinks. So basically, in terms of human emissions, there are only 3 sinks. There's the ocean, where it dissolves and becomes carbonic acid, which is bad. There's the atmosphere, where it creates global warming, which is bad. But then there's the terrestrial uptake, which is natural, which is good. So 2 of the 3 are bad, but one of them is excellent. So the goal of the climate change movement traditionally has been to, of course, limit, you know, well, this, by the way, is up to like 11 now. I'm sorry, these are gigatons of carbon. We're already near 11. Okay. At any rate, this number, God, apologize. This number obviously has to come down, right? But you see, this number can come up, and it can come up quite a bit. And that's really sort of the whole gist of our organization, is to advocate for the methods and the policies that increase this number. While other climate organizations and technological innovations reduce this, we also have to increase this. Now, where there's a problem, and I'll just say it right up front, where there's a narrative problem, is that cows are seen as the problem. Cows are seen by the mainstream climate movement, you know, as part of the problem. They think that to reduce this number, we have to reduce cows or eat less meat. And you see, we push back against that, because that's not a proper understanding of the scenario. In fact, we may need to increase cows, conceivably by quite a bit, in order to restore the vast areas of land that need to be restored to sequester the carbon. But the management obviously must be profoundly different as well. It must be a regenerative management, which is completely doable. And so there's the cognitive tension, which in my group, I mean, we get it every day. You know, I'm a climate activist advocating for cows and grazing, right? But with a nuance. So you can imagine what my daily life is like, going to all these climate meetings, you know, being forever, you know. So this is a major point of I don't know, I don't want to say contention, but this is an issue that we have to resolve. We have to understand the role of ruminants in the climate change resolution. That's an essential piece that we have to understand better. And you know, there's lots of science on that, and I get into a lot of that. I don't have a time check. Can someone just give me a quick Okay, because I don't want to, I do want to leave plenty of time for questions and stuff. And also, if you really do want to ask a question, put it in the chat area, and Jessica will read it. Okay, so this slide is sort of another version of the previous one in terms of sources and sinks. Again, this was a later slide. You see now it's up to 10.9. Remember, the other one was like 8.9. So unfortunately, this number is still going up. Okay, but what we can do is we can significantly increase the number going down. Okay, let's not worry about all the exact numbers here, but you see now here it says atmospheric growth minus 0.2. Here atmospheric growth is 6.3. Notice that the emissions are the same in both slides. So in both slides, the emissions are 10.9, but the atmospheric growth is now negative. So even without changing emissions, we can still be in a negative scenario, or in a drawdown scenario, by increasing the potential land sink. That's not to say that we don't also have to reduce this. Of course we do. But we need to understand the potential for drawdown in soil, which is huge. This is Susan Solomon, atmospheric professor at MIT. She did some fundamental research, which really was the inspiration for Soil4Climate in part. In 2009, she published a paper called Irreversible Climate Change Due to Carbon Dioxide Emissions. Now, I don't know how many of you read peer-reviewed technical literature, but you don't see the word irreversible a lot. I mean, that's, it takes a lot of guts to put out terms like irreversible in peer-reviewed literature. But she did, and she stands by, and she says, this paper shows that the climate change that takes place due to increase in carbon dioxide concentrations is largely irreversible. Okay, so there's a nuance there. For 1,000 years after emissions stop, the increases of carbon dioxide concentrations are largely irreversible. In other words, the CO2 will continue to go up. The climate change that takes place, okay, will continue to go up. And here is her graph from her paper. And here at the bottom right, thermal ocean expansion, global warming average. Okay, so just a quick correction. The CO2 doesn't continue to go up, but the impacts of the warming do for millennia. All right. Now, that was 2009. In 2013, 4 years later, the IPCC put out this statement: a large fraction of anthropogenic climate change resulting from CO2 emissions is irreversible on a multi-century to millennial timescale, except for the case of a large net removal of CO2 from the atmosphere over a sustained period. Sorry, I don't know why it's jumping ahead. Oh, good Lord. Okay, a large net removal. That really, this statement is really sort of the foundation of Soil4Climate. It's a two-part statement. The first part summarizes Solomon 2009, a large fraction of anthropogenic climate change resulting from CO2 emissions is irreversible on a multi-century to millennial timescale. That's the first part of the paragraph, right? Now the second part, except in the case of a large net removal from the atmosphere over a sustained period. IPCC 2013. And what's that large net removal? It's soil. And this gets into the science of the soil food web. I just, I don't have time to get into all this, but you're probably familiar with, with most of this anyway. These are, the roots superimposed here on a backdrop, like I showed before. It's not just a CO2 solution, it's a water solution. It increases the water table, and then you get more surface water. Now, of course, there are many ways to be a good land steward. Reforestation is obviously one of them. This is just meant to be an organic, picture, healthy, good farming, organics, no chemicals, and then the no-till process. I'm sure you're all completely familiar with all this, so it's not my place to tell you about these types of practices. I'm sure you know about it. Oh, and then biochar. I'm not going to get into biochar that much, but look into it. It's an important part of the picture. So what I want to focus on is sort of the grazing part of it. And because this is the part where there's contention, and because it's so important. So so the idea is to use livestock as a proxy for wild herds. And so this is a picture I took at the Africa Center for Holistic Management in Zimbabwe. This is the center started by Alan Savory, and it is sort of like the hub for demonstrating the restoration and the methodology. Mixed herd, goats, sheep, and cattle, and this is the typical type of situation in most of the dryland areas. Condensed herd. You can see the herders here. There's 3 in this picture right here. 1, 2, 3. There's probably a few other back here. And the herders, they just sort of gently walk, just sort of casual walk, and the cows and the animals, they just sort of walk. The whole mass just sort of moves around. So it creates this proxy of the herd impact. I'm sure you've heard of this type of thing before. And, here's an example of the type of restoration that's possible, over time. And now the top left, you see, unfortunately, it's everywhere now. It's in the United States now. Parts of the US are starting to look like this. It's all over. And then people say, oh, well, it was overgrazing. There were too many animals. It's like, no, there aren't any animals. That's part of the point. There aren't enough. And then they say, well, it's climate change. Well, then how come it got better in the 10 years and the 9 years? It's not climate change, and it's not overgrazing. It's actually in the proper way to describe what's happened is there's an interruption of the process of large packs of ruminants moving over a grassland terrain. It's an interruption of that system. So it's not that there's too many or too few animals. The dynamic itself has been interrupted. And that's what happens when you create parcels of land and you give, a few people a couple of goats and cows and whatever. And they say, oh, well, there's too many, they overgrazed. That's not the problem. In many cases, there aren't enough. And then the problem is that they're not a herd and they're not moving as a proxy of the way wild herds should. So in this case, they've significantly increased the animal density. I think there's a 5-fold increase. And combined with that is this herd movement and these, and then you can see the restoration. And now this sort of gets into detail here. The first part of the restoration is these annuals. They're called aristida, that they sort of crawl along the surface. But then you start to get a perennial, and then you get the deep-rooted perennial here. You can kind of see it showing up here. And then this is me. We call this the two-tree site. And then you can see the profound change that's happened. And then this is the same site, but I've been to this site multiple times. So this is a wetland. These are different pictures. during different times of year. Now, sometimes people see these pictures, and because this is a seasonal rainfall environment, people think, oh, well, it's a dry picture versus a wet picture. It says, no, we need to be careful about that. This is all dry land. This is all dry season photography here. Okay. This time I happen to be there during the wet season, but it's not a dry season versus wet season issue. But during the wet season, you do get to see, you know, a lot more of the full robustness of the ecosystem. And I thought there's a picture. Yeah, okay. And then this clan is called, I apologize, something maximum, but it's what they call climax grass. You can see it here. This really only grows in the best conditions. Like for this grass to exist, the conditions have to be excellent. And then look down here at the bottom right, see the millipede and the fungus, see the wet soil. You know, this is a healthy ecosystem now. And then this is, they call this the elbow site. Similar story. There's Alan Savory. So this is what, 2006, 2003, 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. Bang. This is a Google Earth view. The bottom is the property of the Africa Center Holistic Management. The top is the Victoria Falls National Park. So this is your national park. It's supposedly all the best management, no hunting, no cows. These pictures were taken by me on the same day. Same day. This is what it looks like at the Africa Center for Holistic Management. This is 20 kilometers away. There's Victoria Falls National Park. So which property is suffering from climate change? Which property is suffering from drought? See, which property has overgrazing? The animal density down here is probably 10 times what it is up here, but it's managed properly. Okay, pictures taken by me, April 19th, 2019. Okay, I'm having a problem advancing the slides. I don't know. Oh, this is an infrared photography. Okay, thermal imaging. No, this is a project we're going to work on. We're going to start doing thermal imaging, infrared analysis of these holistically managed properties compared to regularly managed properties. Regularly, I mean, you know, degeneratively managed or normal. And what the infrared will show you is sort of how stable it is, because the properties that are more bare will have a greater variation. So they'll be hotter during the day and cooler at night. The properties with better vegetation won't have these dramatic swings. They'll be cooler during the day and warmer at night. So that curve will be, you know, mellow, whereas the more desertified properties will have these greater swings. Oh, good Lord. Yeah, so there are just so many examples of this type of restoration. I mean, I just have a lot of slides of this. Which slide has more water? Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, which slide has more water? Okay, so this was an old earth dam, just a sort of a rainwater catchment. The practitioner said that the slide on the left was from a single inch of rain. The 1 inch of rain, of course, would all just drain in. That's what you'd get. He said once it was fully restored, he could get a 6-inch rain and not have standing water there. So in fact, there could be 6 times more water in the green slide than in the desertified slide. Okay, now, how are we doing for time? Okay.
10:04.
All right. So I'm just going to, just jump ahead a little bit. Oh yeah. Okay. You gotta see these. This is a Karoo in South Africa. And, I'll sometimes show this picture and I'll say, again, same thing. Which side gets more rain? Which side is suffering from drought? Which side is suffering from global warming? See, none of those factors are a factor in this situation. Oh, then I'll say, which side has more animals? And then people go, oh, right? They have to think about that for a second. And then they kind of want to say, well, the desert slide. And I'm like, oh, well, what are they eating? Right? You notice there's no grass on the desert side at all. None. There's not a single blade of grass. That's all just shrub, woody plants. So anyway, you've heard the story already. 4 or 5 times more animal density on the left side, managed holistically. And which side is more animals? Which side is mitigating global warming? Okay. And here's that property from Google Earth. There you go. You can see it from space. And still to this day, people are saying, we need less ruminants. No, we need many more. I stand by that. We need many, many more ruminants, and they need to be managed this way. Okay.
So,
okay, that's Gabe Brown. I'm sure you know him. So look at his soil. Look at that. I mean, it's amazing. 8% soil organic matter, 76 tons of carbon per acre to 12 inches. I mean, this soil loves carbon. This is your climate solution. And there's Gabe's property on the top. He is doing some areas of just grazing and some areas of grazing with soybeans in a rotation. So he is still also growing soybeans some of the time, but it's in a rotation with grazing. And other areas are just grazing. There's his neighbor, Route 83 is the boundary. His neighbor's growing rapeseed, canola oil, seed oils, right? And here's Gabe looking at his neighbor's property. So there he is, right here somewhere on Route 83. Oh, good Lord. I don't know why it's not advancing. There's something. Okay. Okay, so again, you can see it from space and from the ground. So there's a lot of science here to back up all this. I'll wrap up in a minute, but there's a lot of science to back it all up. Here's a key paper, The Role of Ruminants in Reducing Agriculture's Carbon Footprint in North America. Reducing. So somehow I got into this mode where it's on a timer and it's advancing based on so many seconds. And I don't know how I got into that, and I don't know how to get out of it. And I apologize for that. I may just have to do it this way. But this is from that paper. This is where it gets kind of techie, but I think you guys can handle it. So this is the paper that introduced the term AMP grazing. That stands for adaptive multi-paddock. Adaptive, well, here it calls it regenerative adaptive multi-paddock AMP grazing. This term is now showing up more and more in peer-reviewed literature. There's a whole bunch of terms that are showing up. holistic grazing, lots of terms, but don't confuse it with like rotational or continuous. Try to look for a more nuanced term, if you will. Anyway, this was his estimate. So scenario, that's gigatons of carbon per year. Okay, this is a drawdown, amp grazing, scenario 5, minus 0.7, let's just say 0.8. Okay, that's 0.8 gigatons. That's 800 million tons of carbon drawdown per year. This is just in North America. This is a scenario. This is a projection. This is not an actual measurement, but that's now a peer-reviewed scenario of what's possible. And let me just go here real quick. There's lots of science on this. What can I get to just real quickly? And then we'll stop for questions. This is another sort of seminal paper, Global Cooling by Grassland Soils of the Geologic Past and Near Future. Global cooling by grassland soils of the geological past and near future. Gregory Ritalik, 2013. Global expansion of grasslands and the newly evolved carbon-rich soils, mollisols, over the past 40 million years have induced global cooling and ushered in the Pleistocene glaciation. Pleistocene glaciation is just a fancy way of saying the ice ages. The reason why we have the ice ages is because the evolution of grasslands reduced the CO2 level of the planet so much so that that slight wobble then became a dominant factor. You see, when you have CO2 levels, I don't know, above about 500 parts per million or so, there are no ice ages. The wobble is always there. Like the Earth always has that wobble that creates the ice ages, but it doesn't, it's not relevant because the CO2 is too high. So the CO2 completely mitigates the ice ages. The ice ages are only even possible when CO2 levels get below a certain point. Well, it took the evolution of grasslands to make that happen. That's why we have ice ages, in fact, was because of the carbon drawdown in grasslands in their coevolution with ruminants. Okay, and then bottom. Modern grassland agroecosystems are a potential carbon sink already under intensive human management, but carbon farming techniques may be useful in curbing anthropogenic global warming. Okay, now, when a scientist says, well, this may be possible, that's their way of being modest. That's their way of saying, yes, it's possible. I believe this is possible. I wouldn't bother putting that sentence in the abstract. Okay, and here is again, this is a picture from that paper, and it shows the evolution of the grassland soils with the evolution of ruminant ungulates. So the hooved creatures that are also ruminants, these co-evolved out of the ancient forests with the grasslands during the drop and during a profound drop of CO2. It created a new type of soil called the mollisol. You may have heard that term before. And hang on a second, just because we're running out of time, I just want to jump ahead to some graphs. So this is another just important one to see. That what you see in the bottom here is a 40 million year history of CO2, and superimposed on his on the Ritalik graph of the evolution of grasslands and mollisols. So you see a profound drop in CO2 during the evolution of grasslands and mollisols, and of course that's what created the ice ages. And then here's Gabe and I'll just show one more. Hang on, just give me 1 second here. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Yeah, this is an important one to get in terms of the science. Now, just bear with me. the top one is a 400 million year graph of the temperature of the Earth, okay? There have been multiple cooling and warming periods. What we want to concern ourselves with is this one here, the E that stands for the Eocene. Okay, this is about 50 million years ago. Good Lord. Okay. All right. About 50 million years ago, there's a profound drop in the global temperature. And that's what creates the ice ages. And then this whole part right there corresponds to this. So this bottom graph is the same thing, but it's on different time scales. So this one is on millions of, 50 million years for each section for the top one. But the bottom one is on different time scales for each segment. But what you see here, what's happening is this is the evolution of grasslands and ruminants. And in this, so this whole area here corresponds with this, and then the ice ages occur. Then you have the beginning of agriculture, and this is called the Holocene. And then you have industrial agriculture, and now you're seeing CO2 and temperature levels spiking back up. So this is a large, this is a 50 million year story. That's basically we're in this story here. It's a 50 million year story of global cooling caused by the evolution of ruminants and grasslands. And then here's that same story just expanded out. And then, agriculture starts 10,000 years ago. And you see how it levels out here? That's called the Holocene. Global warming began 10,000 years ago with the evolution of agriculture. We've been holding off the next ice age. We should already be about 2,000 years into the next ice age. Okay, why don't I stop there? And I apologize for the, for some of the technical, problems here. But I think you get the point. Let me just finish by just saying showing one more slide. This is sort of just a personal thing for me here. We all saw the Jeff Bezos, Shatner media extravaganza, Captain Kirk, right? Gets out of the module here. This is West Texas, sorry. But all I saw was desertification. To me, that was just a story of desertification. This picture, the bottom one, was taken 20 miles away. Here are the spots on Google Earth Pro. 20 miles away, same everything. Look at the difference. This is being managed by a grazer named Bob Kinford. And he's doing his managed grazing for restoration. And I say, choose your future. Only 20 miles apart in West Texas, they may as well be different planets. All right, thank you. I'll stop there. And I'll stop this share. So let's just take questions and all that stuff. I don't hear anybody.
Anybody have any questions for Seth?
Yeah, feel free just to go ahead and unmute if you have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Something I didn't pick up on in this is how many acres do we need to convert over to better practices to make the impact?
All of them. There's about 10 billion acres. In the international academic literature, they use hectares. So you see 3.4 billion hectares. You see that number a lot. And by that, they mean all of the land which is of this type, some sort of former perennial grassland ecosystem, whether it's a savanna or, or more like the US Great Plains, a steppe. There's roughly 10 billion acres in that type of system. Now, I know this is an Ohio conference, and I know Ohio is big into soybeans. I honestly don't know what the future for soybeans is going to be. I don't see it. I don't see how we have a profound drawdown of carbon and continue to have soybeans, unless you're doing it the way Gabe Brown does it, which is in a rotation with grazing. But the industrial soybean model that I know is a major part of the Ohio farming. I mean, not just Ohio, but you're the Ohio conference. That's the key thing. I think we're going to have to move out of perennial grains and get back to just grazing. And that's why I push back against the less meat thing, because I think they're missing that nuance. And then people say, well, how much can you do and whatever? And I'm like, look, we just have to do it. We just need to have the policies in place to start rewarding people who are restoring their soil. Just one way or another, those policies have to be in place. And there's two steps, right? There's the stick and the carrot. We need to stop subsidizing the petroleum-based agriculture. And we need to start rewarding somehow people who are improving the soil. Now, there is the whole sort of carbon credit thing, and there's a lot of pushback against that. But there are other things coming out. This is ecological services. You could just measure biomass. Some of just count the butterflies. There's a million types of indicators. It's not just about soil carbon, and soil carbon is the most difficult one to measure. But there's all kinds of measurements you could do from satellite, in real time. So I don't know what all the sticks and carrots are, but I know they have to be there, and we're rewarding the wrong practices, obviously, as you know, and so we have to start to move away from that.
So outside of the United States, is there an area that is more progressive on this front that we should be looking to or lauding or trying to use for momentum?
My experience has been that there's these sort of islands of hope, if you will, just about everywhere. Even in Africa, Zimbabwe, this is the desertification is so bad. You've got the savory property there, which is like an oasis, and then that other picture I showed you from the Karoo, remember, where it was green on one side and desert on the other. There's things like that happening everywhere now. Mexico, United States. We're working on a project in Kenya. I didn't even have a chance to show those slides. And obviously, the wetter you are, the easier it is. Ohio gets like what, around 35 inches of rain a year, something like that. So, you're in a pretty forgiving place there. But the drier areas are less forgiving. So you really should be doing it, in Ohio. Now, look, if Ohio were just completely left alone, if humans went away, a large part of it would come back to forest. But you see, if West Texas is left alone, it doesn't come back to forest. It doesn't come back to anything. It just stays desert. It absolutely has to have those animals. But a lot of Ohio, the forests are gone. It is already in commercial agriculture. And so I'm saying, well, okay, we can keep it in commercial agriculture, but it can't just be like soybeans. You have to integrate grazing in this restorative way.
Seth, I would also like to draw everyone's attention to a really important piece of legislation that is related to this. It's called the Agriculture Resilience Act, or the ARA. And I hope that people here can take a look at it, or you can feel free to contact me for more information about it. It's a piece of legislation that really lays out the policy solutions, the things that need to happen to support and encourage the type of changes that Seth has been talking about in this presentation. If you're going to be coming to our conference in person next week, and we'll also have a lot of information about that at our policy booth table. And there is information about it up on the OEFFA website as well. So I hope that if you're interested in this topic, that you'll take a look at that, because that's something that's really important for us to be pushing for.
We do have a policy page, by the way. I had a slide on that. Yeah, the URL is just policy.soil4climate.org. It's a visual database. It needs to be updated, but let me put it into the chat window here. You can take a look at that.
I know we're almost out of time, but I was also wondering like how farmers reacted, like if you have been in communication with farmers and like what their thoughts and concerns are about this type of thing, and like if they like are optimistic about it or interested. I'm just wondering how your conversations with farmers about this have gone.
You know, it's really fascinating because I came to this from a climate perspective, and you know, I mean, I'm you know, I'm just sort of joking here, but you know, I was sort of your classic liberal, if I can say that, you know, East Coast, and you know, I thought farming was bad. And I have it's just such a profound change in my own life, in my own view of the world and politics, frankly. And I just love farmers now. You know, and a lot of them, you know, look, they don't want to talk about climate. They don't even want to talk about carbon. And I don't blame them. You know, I really don't. They're not doing this for climate or carbon. They're doing it because they love land, because they want to take care of their families. They want to have a good crop. By crop, I mean either vegetable or animals. They're just doing it for basic reasons. They're not doing it to save the world. And I love that. I love that about them. And I mean, I've been told, look, you know, there are other Facebook groups that I'm in, and I've been told straight up, you know, we're not going to talk about climate in this group, you know, and if you talk about it, you know, we're going to delete your post. Mm-hmm. So, you know, so there you have it. Then it's the irony for me that some of the best climate heroes don't want to talk about it and are also vilified by so-called climate activists. So I'm in a very interesting position because I'm getting hated from all sides, but I'm also getting loved from all sides too. You know, there are lefties, if you will, who finally get it. They're like, okay, we get it. You know, we need animals, and there are people in the animal sector who are like, okay, well, we need to change how we do business.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and put the link for the evaluation in the chat. If people don't mind just taking a quick look at that as we start to wrap up. I really want to thank Seth so much for taking the time to be here with us this day to talk about these ideas that are really important. This topic is something that is super important in OEFFA's policy work, because we know that farmers, our members, are very interested in healthy soils, and that healthy soils are one of the major things that can help to address the issue of climate change. And so this is going to be a huge focus of our work here for the next few years. And so I look forward to hearing from any of you who would like to be doing more on this. Thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you, everyone. It really was a pleasure. And please, email me. I'm just Seth.Itzkan, first name, last name at Gmail. And join the Soil4Climate Facebook group if you aren't already in it. If you're afraid of Facebook, and I don't blame you, follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.